Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Lisa Love and welcome to this video on 10 evolutionary groups, how humans evolve as understood by Alice Bailey. And in this particular video, we're going to look at group 3. Now again, Bailey's 10 evolutionary groups are general divisions attempting to show how humans progress from their baser animal instincts, where they're focused mainly on surviving and procreating, to the point where they know who they are as spiritual beings and live accordingly. According to Bailey, humans of all 10 groups are said to exist among us. Those in the first 6 groups are primarily focused on becoming human. Groups 7 and 8 are focused on becoming soul, and groups 9 and 10 on becoming spirit, or she would call it becoming the monad. So there are 3 main stages in the Bailey model. Please refer to that video in this class if you want to learn more about that. Groups 1 through 6 focus primarily on the first stage, that of becoming human, which is my phrase for it. Bailey calls it the integrated personality, and she talks about how this group is on the path of individuation, learning how to become an individual. They are Lemurian in consciousness, though I see group 3 is primarily Lemurian, moving to Atlantean. Now, Bailey says directly in her books that groups 1 and 2 are Lemurian, 4 and 5 are Atlantean. She doesn't specify exactly what group 3 is, so I see it as transitional, and based upon the correlations I've done with Lemurian consciousness and Atlantean consciousness in her books, I feel that this is a good supposition to see group 3 as transitional. Now, to let you know, when we talk about Lemuria or Atlantis and Lemurian and Atlantean consciousness, we are not talking about an ancient Lemuria or Atlantis somewhere back there in time, like that went underwater or something like that. We're not talking about a race of people, Lemurian or Atlantean. We are talking about a level of consciousness, which is why you need to get that really fixed in your mind, because Bailey says that almost all of humanity is Atlantean in consciousness. And if you're thinking about some ancient Atlantis that got flooded back then, you're going to get really confused in her system. So don't see it that way. Just focus on the evolutionary names as being levels of consciousness. All 6 groups are focused on the realm of the 5 senses. They pretty much only wake up in the morning and open their eyes and their ears and believe whatever they see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, and don't focus on any kind of esoteric or internalized path. They're exoteric, looking out through the world of the 5 senses as what is real. And they're trying to gain sufficient mastery or manipulation of the body, emotions, and minds for purpose of exploiting the outer world of the 5 senses. That doesn't mean that they have real mastery of their minds or even their emotions. It just means that they're increasingly learning how to exploit them sufficiently enough so that they can get their desires met. Now, those desires are primarily, as you'll hear me say over and over again through this course, for money, security, pleasure, sex, and power. And group 1 and 2 has very little capacity to get those needs met. Group 3 is getting a little better at it, but not much. Group 6 has total mastery. They're like the 1%ers or the 10%, the 1% that we hear about, that have learned how to get all the money, security, all the pleasure, sex, all the power they want, and more than they should ever have. That's what they've been able to master within the realm of the integrated personality of becoming human. This is not a spiritual stage, the stage of the integrated personality. Most people are surprised to know that. The integrated personality is ultimately very selfish and separative, especially as one gets into group 6 and before they reach the crisis of starting to move into spiritual life. And that's another thing to be really clear about when you enter into the Alice Bailey model. Again, most of humanity is said to be in groups 3, 4, and 5, according to Bailey. There's the references there. I'm going to get my little pointer out here. And what you're going to see is that they are primarily on the emotional plane. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planes in the Bailey model, and there are 7 subplanes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 7 is 49 subplanes all together. These represent different levels of consciousness that is unfolded throughout time. Now, I believe that group 3 is primarily located within these subplanes here. the uh, third subplane, counting here, 765, actually counting from below up, 5 and 4th subplane is where I would see them if we count 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's where I would see in Bailey's model group 3 as primarily being. Now, Bailey herself does not say that. I am saying that from having done the numerous correlations of different factors in her model. Now, groups 3, 4, and 5, again, are said to be the most numerous on the planet. They have their everyday attention focused and consciousness focused on fulfilling their desires, primarily for money, security, pleasure, sex, and power. And that shouldn't be too surprising. I mean, go to any city and just walk down the city streets, and what are almost all the stores about? They're almost all about getting some money, getting some security, buying a home, selling a home, getting some property, having pleasure, avoiding pain, getting sex, getting some power, or wishing you had power, or feeling satisfied that those in power are no longer in power because it's good to have revenge because you can't have power. And so it's nice to see them fall down and be humiliated and disgraced. Look at most movies, look at most television, listen to most music, and it's pretty much overwhelmingly about these things. It's real easy to check for yourselves and see if this premise of Bailey's is correct, that groups 3, 4, and 5 are primarily on these levels. Now, groups 3, 4, and 5 are all subject to a lot of emotional highs and lows. They really don't have much mastery of the emotions. Group 3 is primarily emotionally impulsive. Group 5 is more emotionally controlled, but usually through repressing the emotions. Group 5, I call the enforcers. They follow the rules and they make sure everybody else follows the rules so that things don't get messy, so we can all have a better chance of getting our money, security, pleasure, sex, and power needs met and not having things get screwed up. But group 3 especially is good at screwing those things up. Group 4 is kind of in between the two. Group 4 can swing to being more impulsive emotionally and can also be more emotionally controlled. And again, all three groups are locked in the realm of the 5 senses. If their desires for money, security, pleasure, sex, power are frustrated, they believe it is because a force out there stopped them instead of viewed as a lack of mastery within their own psyches. Why do bad things happen to good people? In groups 3, 4, and 5, it's because God or the devil or somebody out there made it happen. Not because interiorly there was not enough discipline, enough understanding of the emotions, enough cultivating of the mind, enough interior work done in terms of spiritual practice. So, like those in groups 1 and 2, they struggle, group 3 struggles to adequately navigate their environments to meet their basic needs. It's not easy for group 3. It's easier than with group 1 and 2. They're totally dependent on others to get those needs met. Group 3 is exercising their muscles, so to speak, to get those things met. But unlike those in groups 1 and 2, they have found some methods for increasing their odds for sporadically, and that's an important word, sporadically meeting those survival needs. They meet them sometimes and then they go without. There's not consistency. Group 5 has a lot more consistency, and that's why group 5 is the enforcers, because they don't want to lose that consistency of making sure that they can pretty well feel secure and count on those needs getting met. Group 3, it's sporadic. And they are also looking for methods that will help them get relief from the emotional pain that they feel due to the struggle in their lives. That relief can be entertainment outlets, it can be sexually acting out, it can be drugs and alcohol, it can be violence, whatever it is out there in the realm of the 5 senses that will help them get that relief. Unfortunately, the methods group 3 types choose tend to usually bring them only temporary relief at best. And these methods include a tendency to form tribal protective groups. You got to get the tribal family around you. You got to get the club that you belong to that will have your back. But one of the things that you see, especially in group 3, is that these tribal groups frequently resort to abuse and violence to help dominate, control, and coerce others into giving them what they desire and feel they need. So we're going to see a video clip on that coming up here within this video of how they usually admire people that use primarily physical means and emotionally violent means, physical, emotional abuse, control, and violence to get what they want. One reason they're like that is if you go back to that chart that I have, a Bailey's model, they're not that far out of the physical plane. They're just, here's the physical plane, and here they are just a little bit into the emotional plane. So they have more physical mastery. In fact, they may take a lot of pride in their physical development. That might be the way that they feel that they can protect themselves, you know, because they don't have a lot of other options in life. When you get to the higher groups, you can rely upon, especially the group 5 enforcer types, to go out and protect you. Group 3 doesn't have that. They have to learn how to protect themselves. And so learning how to be physically strong or to get the weapons that they need to help them feel physically strong is especially important to this group. And you can see that in a way because of their vulnerability that they have. So now we're going to watch a video clip that I feel represents group 3. This is a trailer to the movie The Sandlot. Now, group 1 is primarily, we recapitulate, we go through these stages again, and most human beings are not in groups 1 and 2. So almost all of us capitulate how to become physically coordinated and understand that we are an individual separate from that rouge test. If you looked at my previous videos, put a dot of rouge on an infant's face, and like a 1-year-old won't realize that it's me that has the dot. You know, when we get about 18 months, we look in the room and we say, I have a dot on my head. What is that? But before that stage, we don't have that. That's group 1. Group 2 is that more childlike stage. Group 3 is now starting to exercise their independence. They struggle, which we're going to see this again, they struggle between dependence on those around them, especially parents, to getting more independence. And yet they really feel an insecurity there. They struggle with bullying and abuse. They struggle with knowing where they fit in and where they can feel safe and secure in a tribal group of some kind. We'll see that a little bit in this video clip. There's a lot of impulse. There's a lot of action that has some repercussions, like cakes falling. There's a lot of stupid name calling. This is the way that they survive. And before we get into this clip, I want to say one more thing. If you remember in what I've said in the previous videos, we're not just simply in one group. Most of us are in 2 or 3, maybe even 4 groups at the same time. And we go up and down. We may be in the group 5 enforcer group and have our act all together. And then we have a lot of trauma in our lives and we suddenly go right back down into group 3 behaviors. Or we may have moments where we rise really high. And we're like in a group 6, maybe we won a lottery, and now we're in a group 6. We can have everything we want, but we haven't really figured out how to hang on to it because we don't have the skills, or we've inherited all that money. Most money's lost by the 3rd generation because we don't really have the consciousness or the ability to hang on to it. And so we may have that quick elevation to that high level and then we go crashing down. Again, it's because the state of consciousness hasn't stabilized in one of these groups to be able to handle that kind of sudden leap. So we go up and down playing chutes and ladders, as I've said in different videos. This said, let's watch this trailer. Now, I need to let you know that for some reason with this PowerPoint, I haven't figured it out. After each of these video clips, I have to stop, go back and reload my PowerPoint. So just be patient with me while I do that. And let me also move this little dot laser pointer out of the way. There we go. And here we are with our video clip.
I know you're smart and I'm proud of you. I want you to make some friends this summer.
Meet Scotty Small.
Tail, get it! The kid is a L7 weenie. My life's over.
Man, this is baseball. You gotta stop thinking. You just have fun.
Climb trees, hop fences, get into trouble.
Just stand there and stick your glove out in the air. I'll take care of it.
Now he's in.
Yeah! All right!
With the coolest guys in the neighborhood. They've got the look.
Wendy Peppercorn. Wow. Hey, girls.
They've got the moves. They've got the rap.
Blockhead. Geek. Jerk. Idiot. Moron. You bob for apples in the toilet. And you like it. You play ball like a girl.
Something else has got their ball.
That wasn't my ball!
Dad's father gave it to him. Babe Ruth signed that ball.
Babe Ruth! We gotta get that ball back.
Got any bright ideas?
Initiate retrieval section number 1. Power connect. Come on, help me, it's heavy. Now. Fire! You gotta Mommy, look, a doggy. Ooh, a big doggy.
20th Century Fox presents
Hey guys, it's the Sandlot baby.
You're the ones that making all that racket.
A Lifetime of Adventure.
Come on, Squid, you can do it. Pull through, bud. You little pervert.
The Sandlot. A little piece of paradise, a half a block wide, and a whole season long.
Scotty, have you made any friends yet?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mom.
Well, there it is. You can see the you can see a lot of the themes that I was talking about here, in that you see the impulsiveness, you see the daring, you see how it doesn't always go according to plan, you see the desire to be independent, a lot of these kinds of characteristics. They're trying to get their survival needs met, but it's sporadic. The emotional range is mostly shallow and impulsive, acting on feelings often with little thought. We saw that in that Sandlot video. They just simply weren't always having things go according to plan because they weren't very well planned out. Desires are mainly superficial. We saw that in the name calling and kissing the girl and just the juvenile way they were acting. But group 3 is pretty much the juvenile 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade stage is when it kicks in a lot, and it stays that way for a number of adults. And the constant struggle between dependence and independence. So you saw some of that in this video. Now, group 3 also gravitates towards leaders. Why? Because they still feel very vulnerable. They don't have a lot of emotional control. They don't have a lot of mental capacity. They don't have a lot of their needs met. They don't know how to get a lot of their needs met. And it's very, very difficult. So they look for leaders who will be strong men, capable of controlling large masses of people, usually through threats, violence, and intimidation. Why is that? Because quite honestly, most group 3 people have had a tremendous amount of abuse happen to them as well. And so it's really a liberating feeling to feel like they will one day be the top man, the top dog, the one that can, take down the bully that used to take them down. Group 3 types tend to worship these leaders, the strongman type, seeing them as heroes, especially if they enable group 3 types to be lawless, rebellious, and free. Group 3 types are really into freedom. But sadly, that often makes them free to be dumb and not really free, because they lack the intelligence to tell the difference between true freedom, which is going to come through the life of the soul, the life of spiritual values, the life of disciplined physical body, disciplined physical life, good habits, the ability to really understand and work with the emotions, a well-trained mind, spiritual values and principles, and especially further on, the freedom that comes from enlightenment or liberation. Bailey would say that's on the path of initiation as you recognize who we really are as soul. For them, this lack of discernment and thinking that freedom is just having more stuff, more sex, more pleasure, more power, more ways to numb the pain out through addictive activities or more violent power over others, more money. This is what group 3 thinks is freedom. And the fact that they can't really discern what real freedom is means that they're often exploited by group 5 and especially group 6 types of individuals in ways that ultimately don't serve the best interest of those in group 3. Now, group 6 is able to get all the money, sex, pleasure, power they want. And so one of the things that we typically see, group 6 is like the 1%ers or 10%ers that, they won't go to war. They'll send group 3 types to war, because group 3 types are wanting to be heroes. And so they're going to go in and they're going to get blown up into little bits more easier. Or they will conscript group 4 and 5 groups in through rules and regulations that group 6 made up, type of thing. But regardless, there is a certain level of courage that we're going to see in group 3 types, but also a lot of exploitation. And that means that group 3 types sadly keep taking so many hits. They'll go to war, they'll be a hero, they'll come back, they'll be blown to bits, and they won't have the health care that they need, or they'll end up homeless on the streets. And this is where, especially as we get into group 7, 8, 9, and 10, we need to be in positions of power so that we can help prevent the kind of abuses that happens with group 3 and lead them through group 3 into areas that are truly good for them and will eventually lead them towards the true freedom that they crave. So again, group 3 is prone to hero worship, especially those who magically and impulsively defy the norms. So DC Comics are really popular, Marvel Comics. Why are these superhero movies like the big blockbuster hits? It's because they have superhuman powers that especially group 3 types want, because that's the only way they feel that they can ever get some of these things, is through the imagination and fantasy that magically they could have them come to them. Group 4 is a lot like that too, we'll see. Group 3 has tribal identity. You're either with them or against them in a limited range of inclusivity. Group 3's range of tribal inclusivity is pretty much the family unit and extended just a little ways beyond that. And they attempt to control others through abuse, and they are often abused or controlled themselves. One of the reasons for the tendency to be exploited amongst group 3 types is that they do possess at their core a desire to live a meaningful life despite their limitations. That's why they want to be heroes. As I say here, they want to be heroes, and even though they may be naive in their approach to becoming heroes, they can show great courage in their attempts to do so. They can be awe-inspiring. And when directed in the right way, members of group 3 can be seen sacrificing their lives for others. Though they may not always understand if it's truly wise to make that sacrifice, the bravery they can demonstrate can indeed win them the admiration of those around them. Now we're going to watch a video clip of a popular movie called The Christmas Story. And in this particular trailer to that movie, I've seen this movie a number of times, you're going to see a lot of these group 3 themes even amongst the parents. There's not a lot of emotional skill. There's not a lot of intellectual discernment. There's valuing stuff that isn't really that valuable. There's a good family bond. You see that, a lot of love within that tribal family, which is actually a little bit more group 4-like than just group 3. So this is actually a mix of group 3 and 4, but it has some group 3 themes in it. Let's give it a watch.
In this modern age, too many people have lost sight of the true meaning of Christmas.
Mom! Hush!
Shut up, Ralphie! So now, in the spirit of the original,
I made you! Stop!
tradition, American Christmas,
Thanks a lot!
MGM presents A Christmas Story.
Dashing through the snow.
Uncle!
In a one-horse open sleigh. O'er the field we go. Laughing all the way. Bells on bobtail ring.
tell you.
I think that says fragile, honey.
Look at that! A Christmas Story.
Come on!
The movie that pulls off Santa's beard. Oh, wow! And unwraps the secrets.
Didn't I get a tie this year?
Of the original, traditional,
He looks like a deranged Easter bunny.
100% two-fisted, red-blooded,
It's smiling at me.
all-American Christmas. A Christmas Story.
So you see my mic kind of going in and out here. So there we have some more themes that are common with this particular group. And really the parents aren't that evolved either in that movie. It can be a funny movie to watch, but it's also a group 3 movie. The mother is primarily a little more group 4. She's more creating the stable, loving family life there. You do see elements of abuse. There was the boy got his mouth washed out with soap from his family, so he was being abused at some level by his parents. That's considered okay in a lot of families, as long as just simply 20, 30 years ago, many families thought it was okay to abuse children. That's not so much okay now. That's a sign that we're evolving more and more out of group 3. You see the boy was being bullied by somebody else until he learned how to punch the bully back there. You see the boy was actually, reason you saw the rifle there is the whole story of the Christmas Story is about him wanting to get a rifle so that he can be like his superhero on TV, and there's more themes there as well. So some other things about group 3: daring and courageous, living in the moment, but often at the expense of rational thinking. And because they don't think ahead, their impulsive natures can lead them into lawless behaviors. We're going to look at that shortly. And as I've already said, freedom or free to be dumb here. So now another thing about the Christmas Story, the father wanted to get a lamp that looked like a leg. That was the big deal about the fragile. That was the lamp that looked like a woman's leg. That was his big dream in life, what he really wanted to win for all of his hard work in life. Again, primarily more group 3 than group 4. Unfortunately, too often the consequences of the bravery of group 3 types can result in them being victimized. They may be encouraged to do things that land them in prison, estrange them from others, or harm them physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and more. The result may be that they continue to live with chronic stress, be prone to PTSD, and resort to, as I've already said, sex, alcohol, drug addictions as a way of coping. If they can avoid exploitation and develop some discernment, they may end up shifting out of group 3 into group 4, even group 5 in this life. Otherwise, they'll remain chronically vulnerable in life despite their best attempts to cope. Now we're going to watch a couple of clips side by side. This one is of the 300. And what I want you to get a sense of there is this is when humanity was especially a lot more group 3 like. We're starting to come out of group 3 a little more. Bailey says we're primarily group 4 and especially group 5 at this point. So one of the things we're going to look at in this trailer is when we were especially a lot more group 3, and the emphasis was primarily on physical strength, physical power, physical conquest, a lot of abuse. It wasn't even considered abuse back then. It was considered purely heroic. Do whatever you want to other people. Murder, nothing wrong with that. Slavery, nothing wrong with that. This is where humanity's consciousness was at, and thankfully we're working out of it. But we can still see, because according to Bailey, group 3 is still the 3rd largest type of humanity, how so much of humanity wants to pull us back down into this level. They want to pull us back down into glorification of physical brute force and physical violence. And they want to pull us back down into where it's okay to exploit and oppress other people, other races, sexualize women, men sexualize men, you know, those baser things that group 3 is about. So here is a video on that.
Hercules himself. Taught never to retreat, never to surrender. Taught that death in the battlefield is the greatest glory he could achieve in his life. Spartans, the finest soldiers the world has ever known.
It's quiet now. They came from the blackness.
Be afraid! Sparta will burn to the ground. 1,000 nations of the Persian Empire descend upon you.
What must a king do to save his world?
Instead, ask yourself, what should a free man do?
Threaten my people with slavery and death.
This is madness!
Madness. This is Sparta!
We will stand and fight!
A new age has begun.
An age of freedom! And all know that 300 Spartans give their last breath to defend it! Spartans! Tonight we dine in hell! Give them nothing, but take from them everything!
Ah, yes, the group 3 good old days of a lot of violence and a lot of sex and suppression and domination and control and power through primarily physical strength. That's the good old days. But here is going to be a clip which is going to connect us more to the reality of these days. And this is a very long clip. I'm going to have to skip in it. This is the wild, real story of Bonnie and Clyde. And Bonnie and Clyde is a real good example I use of a group 3 type. They're very much group 3 type. Now, Bonnie and Clyde were famous couple that were out as robbers and murderers and killers. This video clip doesn't show, another one did, but I just don't have time for all these clips, that both of them were pretty badly abused, especially Clyde Barrow was really badly abused growing up and also badly abused in prison. Both of them suffered physical injuries that were pretty horrendous and had difficulty walking. Bonnie had acid burn through her leg once. I mean, when you really learn about their stories, you have a lot of compassion. They're over glorified in some Hollywood movies. And who would glorify this? And I'm going to show you a little bit of this clip here about what they were really like. Who's going to glorify this kind of robbing banks, murdering people, and going down in a flame of bullets at the end? Group 3 types, because they had the guts to go try and do something to break out of their lives. But it was impulsive, it was courageous, it was daring, and it had a really bloody and not too good end. I'm going to show you just a little bit of this clip, and I'm going to skip ahead after just a couple minutes to the last. the end, their fate after their confinement for 15 years. So basically what I'm trying to show, that's the actual car and the actual footage of them dead. Each one took about 50 different bullets. And what I'm trying to show is this is too often what happens to group 3 types. They really need our compassion. They need groups beyond this stage to help them navigate life more successfully, to channel their courage and that impulsivity into directions that can help them not have this kind of fate. I didn't know that Bonnie and Clyde were only 19 and 21. That's either at the time they died or they were 21 and 23 when they died. I have to check that out again. But essentially it was their babies here, and they didn't get very far. But they got very famous despite how bloody it was because of their supposed love, though you find out that she never divorced the first husband she was married to, and she said she was always in love with, even though she was with Clyde for 2 years, and she still wore her first husband's ring, but he was in prison for murder and never got out. I mean, so even that's over romanticized here. But why do we romanticize this kind of thing? Because so many of us still have this level of consciousness that we haven't worked through in our lives. So let's go to the very end of this video. And I just want to say a couple quick things. This is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And actually, Maslow was indirectly influenced by Bailey's model. If you want to learn about that, you can look at my video on Wise Productions Inc. YouTube channel about how Bailey influenced the different psychologies. But what we're looking at with group 3 is they're primarily learning to master those physiological needs and trying to get more of their safety and security needs met. So that's pretty much where they are. And those of you that are interested in the integral movement as well, what we see is that, let me get my little pointer out. So far, Bailey's group 1 and integral infrared pretty well line up. Bailey's group 2 in magenta. Bailey's group 3 and red line up. We're also going to find out that Bailey's group 4 and amber line up. Group 5 lines up with, sometimes the integral model calls it amber expert. But then things break down from this point on in the Bailey model. There are some comparisons, but they don't really line up real well, especially when it comes to orange. Things are not really right. So there it is. I'm going to pull down the screen, if it'll come down again, and stop sharing. And thank you so much. I know there's a few bugs in this video, but honestly, I'm doing my best. It's been a lot of work just to get it to this point, so I hope you'll be tolerant with those few little bugs. But most of all, I hope you're enjoying the information. Thanks for watching.